everybody. Hello, how are you? I hope the music is at an acceptable range. um, very happy to see you. Um, very glad you could join me for tonight while we do Halloween stuff. It is indeed spooky season, and we all love spooky season. What we're going to be doing today was actually a suggestion by a friend, well, actually a couple of friends of mine. Today we will be reading a couple of horror stories, some creepy pastas, as it were. Yes, I got my little hat on. Thank you for noticing. I am very glad that you like it. Anyways, so if you guys would like to suggest any stories in the live chat, we can read those. Otherwise, I have a set group of stories that I have available to read. And yeah, I am very glad that you could join me for this. Don't be surprised if I'm not that good at this. Uh, I can read voice lines, but and I can read a script, but reading stories and making it sound entertaining is not exactly my strong suit. But I will try my best. Anyways, I have three already set up for us to read. Now I just gotta decide which one. Um, okay. I think I'm gonna go with a very particular one that is a fan favorite of me specifically, and also Isaac. I have, I have the one that you like later. Yeah, me and Isaac grew up on creepy pastas. Anyways, while I read, I'm gonna have a hard time seeing the chat, so you know, uh, I'll occasionally talk into the chat and stuff like that after the stories, obviously. Anyways, so yeah, I guess we should get started. All my equipment and audio is set up, and yeah. Okay, hopefully you guys can hear my voice. In order to protect the privacy of the individuals and victims in the following article, all names have been altered, except the murderer. The details of this story have been adapted to make it smoother, but I will try to tell things. Mr. Helen Otis? I called out to the boy who sat in front of me, but he didn't reply. He was wearing a light blue Haitian robe, his dark green circles under his eyes, his messy jet black hair, and his skin pale as paper, his gaze straight at me, like how a predator stares at its prey. I'm a psychiatrist. My job is to interview patients. He's been here for some time now, but I've never seen him communicate with other patients. He always stayed in the corner of the room. Needless to say, he was an eccentric child. This is a judicial psychiatric hospital. The only difference between this is the way we treat patients with a criminal record to prevent the patients from another infraction. His silence did not help at all. Do you know this? I pulled out a picture in front of him. It showed a set of black-rimmed glasses on the road. This was his crime scene. He stared at the picture and spoke softly. This is from my best friend. Can you tell me something about it? I asked, but he just stared at me without saying a single word. Look, since you came here, we've not been making any progress. If you can tell me something about this, then just tell me about it, please. After I finished my plead, he heaved a sigh and said, It's a rather long story. His story is about a very quiet teen in the class who was accused of stealing a watch which belonged to a very popular classmate. This caused him to be bullied by a group of students. He and one of those students named Tom became friends, but later found that his friend had framed him. They argued at the rooftop, and Tom accidentally fell to his death. This is the photo of Tom's glasses after the accident occurred. I tried to save him. I tried to pull him up, but he let go of my hand. I didn't know what he was thinking at the time. He finished his story. Then looked down at his hands. He seemed to be thinking about something, recalling something that seemed to give him anxiety. I had predicted this before he said anything. The patients who were sent here, as well as their cases, are recorded in their files. Intriguing cases from high schools are very common for teens like Otis. Bygone memories of the past fade, but not in the case of Tom's death. Maybe that's why Helen can't forget the past or forgive himself. What happened after that? I continued my questions. At least we're making some improvements. After Tom died, Halloween was just around the corner, and the school had a Halloween party, and everyone had to dress up. I prepared a mask one night before the event. I was tired, so I napped. Sorry, I'm messing up my lines already. And then I found myself here, in the file. It stated that he killed 17 people that night. No one knows how he did it. They don't rule out the fact that more than one person was involved. Do you remember what happened during the party? Any details? I asked. But he shook his head, and then continued to look down at his fingertips. Doctor, why am I here? He asked quietly. Because you were ill, I answered. He rose his head in response. Come on. You're only 14 years old. Your future is still very bright. I gave him a pat and a smile, hoping to cheer him up. I want to let him know that I'm his friend, not an enemy. This was what I said to that boy. This was the first time that he ever spoke more than a few words. Well, at least he was talking now. We made good progress here. The atmosphere always suffocates me. Maybe because this is a hospital, not the best place for a sane person to stay for long. I get surrounded by different patients every day. I had grown accustomed to it until now. I feel something unfamiliar. I feel like I'm a frail sheep amongst a pack of hungry wolves. I'm pretty sure this place is slowly eating my sanity away little by little. Something in Helen Otis's file stuck out to me, and I decided to ask him in person in the next coming interview. We met in the small room like the previous time. I greeted him with a smile, and he responded with a few blinks. I took that as a greeting from him. As I sat down in my place, I flipped open my notes on his case and looked him in the eyes. I questioned the femininity of his name. Helen, did your parents name you this? He thought for a minute, then told me that his parents had difficulties conceiving children and they were eager to have a daughter, but instead gave birth to a boy. Due to his mother's weak health and their financial situation, they couldn't have any other children as much as they hoped so. They decided to raise their only son as their daughter. As he finished his sentence, he fell into silence. As I was thinking of what kind of response I should give, he opened his mouth again. Not only sorry, let me read the chat for a second. Also, Isaac, I don't know if this is the right story, bro, because oh, the music's loud. Okay, sorry. Isaac, is this the right story? Because I had a hard time tracking down Bloody Painter's story, and this might be a fan fiction, but I'm not 100% sure. Oh god. Oh crap! I accidentally clicked out of the story. What did I do? Ah god! What did I do? Okay, I can fix this. I can definitely fix this. Give me a second. I accidentally clicked out of the story and now I have to like find the page again. Well, guys, this is a scuff on my part. Let's see. Where is the story? I just had it. Okay, let me give me a second. I have to go to my history and actually find it. Let's see. Where was it? I know I had it. There it is. Ah, sorry. That was an accident. Ah, okay. So I messed that up. Yeah, I like as somebody who's listened to Bloody Painter, like I don't know. This just feels a little off, but that's just with me. um. Hmm. Does this? Okay, I think this is where I was at. Sorry. I accidentally I slid my computer to the left and then what it did was it kind of just freaked out. All right. I don't remember where we left off, but we might have to backtrack a little. Not only does his name sound feminine, his parents also bought girls' clothes for him when he was younger, raised him like a daughter instead of a son. Neighbors and children around the area did not know that he was actually a boy. When he reached the age of 6, he had to go to school, afraid that the way he was raised will cause a huge concern. His parents tried to change their ways, finally treating him as a son. Maybe this is why he has some feminine characteristics. My parents are very proud of me, are very fond of me, and I understand their difficulties, so I've not complained about them. They do not think they have any problems. His family is very dysfunctional. He grew up under his parents' twisted faith and overly high expectations, which affected his growth. He lost some basic human traits, but he didn't notice. Plus, he doesn't seem to know how to express his feelings due to the environment that he grew up in. It's hard to change the patient's opinion on their family's faith. I wanted to tell him what his parents were doing is wrong, but it wasn't the right time. So I kept my mouth shut. Although he rarely talks to other people in the hospital, he talks politely whenever he does. We chatted sometimes. We sat on the white bench in the park. We looked like friends. We don't always talk about things related to hospital. We talked nonsense sometimes, and it was these moments that we both felt relaxed, especially me. I really felt the tension between us loosening. In this place, patients will randomly pick up fights with one another. He won't pick up fights, but neither does he stop them. He always manages to avoid any form of chaos and live peacefully under the radar. That's pretty smart of him. In the year of 2001, 3rd of October, he was discharged after receiving treatment for 7 years, and it's time for him to return back to society. He is now 21 years old. He's no longer the boy I remember. I was the one seeing him off, thinking back. Made me feel happy for him. Don't you ever come back here, Helen. If you come back here again, we will only meet when you're sitting on the electric chair. Those were the last words I said to him as I pat his shoulders and smiled. He nodded in response. He had good nature, if you asked me. I remember the look of him when he left. He wore a dark blue windbreaker and a pair of black pants. His hair was still the same messy jet black. When he tried to comb his hair just a little bit, I truly hoped that I wouldn't be seeing him in this place again. After his discharge from the hospital, he was behaving well. We sometimes talked by email or meet up at cafes. We talked about what we were doing now. Uh, Sorry, I was checking out the chat for a second. um, he works as a mover and a cleaner as a part-time job. Um, he saved a small amount of cash and rented a small old house. The environment is quiet and nice. He bought some art tools and started to draw. He told me that he wanted to become a painter. He still didn't talk much, but I was happy that he found his goals in life. He said he never blamed his parents for what they had done to him, but he never once visited his parents after he was discharged. After we confirmed that he wasn't any threat to society, we finished our observations on him. In the year 2003, October, there were a few missing persons cases. Judy George, Maggie Wang, both aged 24, were a few of the victims who were missing. These cases were very popular at the time, but I didn't really care. A user posted this photo on a social network. He said his CCTV recorded this picture on the 31st/10th of 2003 at 2:30 a.m. and stated that someone tried to break into my neighbor's house. There was a human figure behind the masked man. They seemed faint. The police have no clue on who is responsible for these cases. They thought it was some guilty pleasure freak behind them. There was no specific motive as of late. It just seems this was all done for some sick satisfaction, making him harder to track down. Until the police found out the victims were all in the same class with Helen Otis before he entered the hospital, as well as the survivors from the gruesome case from a few years ago. The police decided to investigate his home. When I saw the news, I felt my heart skip a beat. I tried to contact him as well, but to no avail. Something bad was going to happen. I sat in front of my TV, my mind jammed like glue. I can't think of anything or do anything. Helen Otis's old home is now under police investigation. On the 17th of November, the night was dead quiet. That place was silent, which made his house in the middle of a field look more eerie. The police broke the lock on the door and opened it slowly. A rotten stench greeted the intruders from the darkness of the house. One of the policemen shone a torch through the home. Surprisingly, there wasn't a piece of furniture in the entire structure. Apparently, no one had lived there for quite some time. They moved inside quietly to check the source of the smell. Suddenly, one of the policemen felt something brush against his shoulder. When he pointed his torch up, he saw something that scared his mind. An upside-down human with a twisted smile was eyeing the police. The corpse's neck had been ripped wide open. The police freaked out and called out to the others as he scanned the rest of the house. The house was full of such corpses like a butcher's shop. Every single body's flesh was a drawing canvas. The writing on top of it was the process of killing the victims. One of the body's jaws had gotten ripped away brutally. All the paint on the canvas was brown. This was proven later to be the victim's blood after analysis turning brown because of the oxidation. There was a total of 5 bodies in this house, including Judy and Maggie. The other 3 were the ones who gave witness about the murder case involving Helen to the policeman a few years ago. This home seemed to be more like a gruesome art gallery of victims than a butcher shop. All of the bodies and canvases were facing the entrance as if they were greeting the ones who entered their place. And the police couldn't figure out the intention of the murderer other than him making a cruel, sick joke. I fell into a despair I'd never felt before. I really hope that he was not the one who did this. After the news was published, neither can I eat nor sleep normally. My health was sliding downhill. My sanity escaping me. Can anything be worse than this? A newspaper headline. 5 skulls found in House of Horror. Bloody painter strikes again. Next day, after the news was released, I received a call from the police and they asked me about the murderer. They received Helen Otis's patient file for me. I told them everything I knew about him. The police took note that I was not well. I told them that I was terribly shaken by the discovery of Helen Otis. I told them that Helen is really a good person. He was just walking down the wrong path. I thought I had stopped him from going astray. The police found a letter at the crime scene. They asked me to stay calm. The letter was written for me. I asked to receive a copy of the letter from the police. They lied and they left. I stared at the letter, thinking of whether to read it or not. I was on the verge of a breakdown. I could feel my sanity slipping away, but I felt something in the letter could salvage me. As I sat back in my couch, I don't know how long I was staring at the letter in my hands, and I slowly opened it and began to read. Oh, we got a notification. Oh, I don't have alerts set up for this one. Oh, God, I forgot to do it. To whoever did something, thank you. Um, anyways, let's get back to this. Dear Doctor, I finally remember what happened that night after I looked at my mask. That night, 7 years ago, the day before Halloween, I kept fidgeting on my bed, unable to sleep. All of the things that happened to me stung my mind like needles. At that time, I thought to myself, I had to do something about it. Then it happened. I threw a turned-on hairdryer into the public bathtub. There were lots of people present, I remember. I used a simple fork to dig someone's eyes out. I remember I ripped someone's head from their neck. I attacked everyone who lived in the student storms. I can't fully remember all the details. I did what my mind told me to do. When no one was screaming or struggling anymore, peace fell upon me. A peaceful feeling I never felt before. I fell to my well-deserved slumber on a pile of bloody corpses. When I opened my eyes again, I saw you, Doctor. You said that the reason I'm here was because I was sick. Well, I must be pretty ill for now, but I never felt so peaceful in my life. Maybe I'm better off sick like this. You told me that the next time we meet is on the electric chair. What if it was the other way around? You must know that I've got my own way to meet you in person. See you soon. When I finished the letter, my mind went completely blank. What the hell was he trying to say to me? His last words sent a chill down my spine. I felt like prey to him. I became one of his targets to hunt down, to mutilate, to turn into a work of art. Wait, no. Maybe when he was still in the hospital, I was already prey to him. Maybe he longed for this day to come. God knows what was going on in his head. He never showed his emotions, even though I tried. I tried reaching out to him. I'm his doctor, after all. But I could never truly understand what kind of person he was. I even thought of him as a friend. Everything he went through was just a lie. The police won't be on patrol at this time. My life is like an unstable time bomb. Until the day he gets arrested, I will never know what he will do. My chance of getting killed by him will stay the same. I don't know when the worst case scenario will happen to me, so I wrote it down. At least I won't die without letting other people know what happened. And that's what I think. I live alone and it is bad. I began to be paranoid about my environment. Even little things made me jump. Before any of this happened, he used to be the most harmless patient I ever met. But now he can kill me any second he wants to. This is what I get for ignoring the fact that he is a criminal. This is not a lost teen who walked the wrong path in his life. This is actually a real life criminal. And here I am staring at what he is really capable of. Maybe his stable behavior was all nothing but an act. The moment that I felt happy for his recovery was only for me. And I don't know how to face him. I don't know what's going to happen next. I truly hope everything will be okay. I heard my door open. This article was written in Dr. Elmer Christopher's notebook in the drawer. There were some old newspaper articles attached to it. He already moved out of this house when the new owners had found this and posted it online. And then from there, it shows a picture of a wanted poster. um, did you guys enjoy that? Was that fun? Was that fun? Myself? What are you talking about? Was I muted through the whole story? Did you guys actually hear that? I think you should be able to hear me. I am so confused. My microphone's coming through. I know it is. Bro, what is happening? Wait, are you guys lying to me? Is this a trick? Because my OBS is registering my voice, so like you guys should be able to hear me. Anyways, I hope you liked it. Oh, wait, that might be because I accidentally kicked the wire when I was putting my feet up. Because I sit crisscross. Anyways, Isaac, and all you guys, um, yay, Halloween. That was a pretty good story. Bloody Painter is actually one of my favorites, although I like the original. I never heard that story, but that was pretty fun. Well, let's see. What story do I have next? I have like a list of stories to do. Oh, now, that's a small story. Uh, oh my god, this is a small story. Okay. I don't know if this is the original. Give me a second as I currently try to look for the original story because I don't remember this creepypasta being this small of a story. Let's see, where is the story? Oh, the origin is this? That's weird. Okay. Which story? Which story am I gonna do? What sto- I have one in mind, but I'm looking for the original because the one I had set up was like honestly 2 minutes of audio. Is this it? Okay, I don't know if this is the original story because I remember it being bigger, but this one looks like the original story. It's just small. Okay. Yes, indeed, I have a sugar mommy. Oh wait, that's what happened. I think I got a donation. I think I got a donation. I think it was on PayPal though. I forgot. I think I still have my streams connected to PayPal and all that. Let me. I gotta go check this so I can thank them. Let's see. PayPal loads very slow on my phone for some reason. Okay, does it say who it's from or oh god, I have to log in. Okay, I'm gonna have to do this. Uh okay. I can't log in at the moment, but I'll do that later. To whoever donated $1.44, you were amazing and thank you. uh no, it's not that PayPal's bad. It's just that I haven't had a PayPal donation in like a year or two, so I was just like, wait, what? I had a PayPal donation. Hmm. But honestly, any donation is awesome. So to whoever sent that, thank you. You're amazing. Mm. Oh, by the way, how does the music sound? Does it sound too loud, or do you guys want it louder? Like, what's going on with that? Took like a week to come through for me before. Um, all right. Well, thank you to whoever donated. Now, let me put on my spooky music again, and let's read the next story. Isaac, if this is the right story, then this is your favorite story. So, And if it's not your favorite story, then I genuinely have a few questions about your profile picture and a couple of other things. Oh, I'm listening to. I have earbuds in, and I'm listening to creepy, like, music in the background to like get in the whole like vibe. Okay, guys. Let's go into the next story, I guess, and hope for the best. Happy Halloween. Hello, my name is Mitch. I'm here to tell you guys about an experience I had. I don't know if it was paranormal or whatever stupid words people use to describe supernatural phenomena, but after that thing visited me, I believed in that paranormal trash from now on. A week after I moved in with my brother Edward, after my house was foreclosed, I finished unpacking. Edwin liked the idea of me moving in, since we had not seen each other for 10 years, so I was excited. I soon fell asleep after I moved in. After that first week, I heard rustling noises coming from outside at about 1 in the morning. I thought it was a raccoon, so I ignored it and tried to fall asleep. The next morning, I told Edwin about it and he agreed. The next night, however, I thought I heard my window opening and a loud thump as if something entered my room. I darted up and looked around my room, but I saw nothing. The next morning, Edwin dropped his coffee cup when he saw me. He held up a mirror and I saw myself. I had a large gash in my left cheek. After I was rushed to the hospital, my doctor told me that I must have been sleepwalking. But then he showed me something. It made my blood turn cold. He lifted up my shirt to reveal a sewn up incision where my kidneys were. I stared into his eyes, mine widening. You somehow lost your left kidney last night, my doctor told me. We don't know how, though. The next night was my breaking point. Around midnight, I woke up to see a truly horrifying sight. I was staring face to face with a creature with a black hoodie and a dark blue mask with no nose or mouth staring down at me. The thing that scared me the most was that it had no eyes, just empty black sockets. Wait, sorry, we gotta hold for a second because Train Coon's going by. Train Coon is driving right by my house, so, well, actually not driving, it's railroading its way past my house. So we have to give it a second, guys. Oh, my back. Oh, my back. Sorry. Gotta wait for Train Coon to go by. Oh god, even the trains don't like me. You can't hear the train? I think what's happening is my audio thing, since I have it set to a vocalized range of closeness, it's not picking up train activity, even though it's like really loud in my ear. Okay, well, if you guys aren't hearing the train, I guess we can go back to the story. The thing that scared me the most was that it had no eyes, just empty black sockets, akin to a void. The creature also had some black substance dripping from its sockets, oozing out. I grabbed a camera from the nearby mantle and took a picture. Immediately after taking the picture, the creature lunged at me and tried to claw open my chest to get to my lungs. I stopped it by kicking it in the face. As I ran out of my room, I grabbed my wallet. I would need the money. I ran out of my brother's house in the night. I eventually ended up in the woods near Edwin's house and tripped on a rock. I fell unconscious. I woke up in a hospital. My doctor The same one who treated me before I entered the room. I have good news and bad news, Mitch, my doctor stated. The good news is that you had a minor injury and your parents are going to pick you up. The bad news is that your brother has been killed by something. I'm sorry. My parents took me back to Edwin's house to collect my remaining belongings, which I did. Upon entering my room, I was scared but remained calm. I grabbed my camera and then stopped dead in my tracks. In the hallway leading to my room, I saw Edwin's body and something small lying next to it. I retrieved it and entered my parents' car, not mentioning the corpse of my brother. I looked at the thing I had picked up and nearly vomited. I was holding my stolen half-eaten kidney with some black substance engulfing it. I don't know if that was the original story, but that's the end of this story. I hope that was. I don't know if that was the original. You. I don't know if that was the original, but hello. That's the end of that story. Okay. Isaac, you're an eyeless Jack like Stan. Was that the original story, or did I read the wrong one? Hmm. Also, I hope you guys are enjoying the Halloweenness. Hope you guys are creeped out. Let's do some other popular creepypastas. Let's see. What are the top rank? Yeah, that was the original. Okay. Let me go to the popular creepypasta section in the archive. Ooh, this one. It could be fun. Ooh, dude, I'm seeing a lot of classics that I used to be into. Okay. Isaac, just because I didn't do Toby doesn't mean I'm not going to do Toby, because Toby is awesome. We love Toby. Everyone loves Toby. Anyways. Okay, that was the Eyeless Jack one. Now, where's the next story? And besides, we haven't been streaming for that long, so we have like all day to read a ton of like creepypastas, Isaac. Alright, on to the next one. Also, I'm just reading some of my favorite creepypastas personally, honestly. Oh, and well, I like Eyeless Jack. I was just reading that also because I know Isaac would love it. If you get nightmares, I personally promise that I will be there to cuddle you and take care of you throughout the whole night, darling. Just leave your bedroom window unlocked. That's all I ask. Otherwise, getting in is a little bit more hard. But not impossible. Alright, let's continue. Let's see. What? Ooh. Oh, this is a long one. I remember this story. Okay, this is fun. Sleepy dragon pillows. Hello. Okay. On to this one then. You might recognize this one. Okay, X. I need your help with this. This is not copy pasta. This is a long read, but I feel like my safety or well being could very well depend on this. The date is September 7th, 2010. This is video game related, specifically Majora's Mask, and this is the creepiest shit that's ever happened to me in my entire life. Having said that, I recently moved into my dorm room, starting as a sophomore in college, and a friend of mine gave me his old Nintendo 64 to play. I was stoked, to say the least. I could finally play all of those old games from my youth that I hadn't touched in at least a decade. His Nintendo 64 came with one yellow controller and a rather shoddy copy of Super Smash Bros. And while beggars can't be choosers, needless to say, I didn't take long until I became bored of beating up level 9 CPUs. That weekend, I decided to drive around a few neighborhoods, about 20 minutes or so off campus, hitting up the local garage sales, hoping to score on some good deals from ignorant parents. I ended up picking up a copy of Pokemon Stadium, GoldenEye, F-Zero, and two other controllers for $2. Satisfied, I began to drive out of the neighborhood when one last house caught my attention. I still have no idea why it did. There were no cars there, and only one table was set up with random junk on it, but something sort of drew me. I usually trust my gut on these things, so I got out of my car and I was greeted by an old man. His outward appearance was, for lack of a better word, displeasing. It was odd. If you asked me to tell you why I thought he was disappealing, I couldn't really pinpoint anything. There was just something about him that put me on edge. I can't explain it. All I can tell you is that if it wasn't in the middle of the afternoon and there were other people within shouting distance, I would never have thought of approaching this man. He flashed a crooked smile at me and asked what I was looking for, and immediately I noticed that he must be blind in one of his eyes. His right eye had that glazed over look about it. I forced myself to look to his left eye instead, trying not to offend, and asked him if he had any old video games. I was already wondering how I could politely excuse myself from the situation. Sorry, give me a sec. When he would tell me he had no idea what a video game was, but to my surprise, he said he had a few ones in an old box. He assured me he'd be back in a jiffy and turned to head back into the garage. As I watched him hobble away, I couldn't help but notice what he was selling on his table. Littered across his table were rather peculiar paintings, various artworks that looked like ink blots that a psychiatrist might show you. Curiouser and curiouser, I looked through them. It was obvious why no one was visiting this guy's garage sale. There wasn't exactly aesthetically pleasing pieces of art here. As I came to the last one, for some reason it looked almost like Majora's Mask. The same heart-shaped body with little spikes protruding outward, and initially I just thought that since I was secretly hoping to find that game at these garage sales, some Freudian bullshit was projecting itself into the ink blot, but given the events that happened afterwards, I'm not so sure now. I should have asked the man about it. I wish I would have asked the man about it. And after staring at the Majora-shaped blot, I looked up, and the old man was suddenly there again, arm's length in front of me, smiling at me. I'll admit, I jumped out of reflex and I laughed nervously as he handed me a Nintendo 64 cartridge. It was the standard gray color, except that Someone had written Majora on it in black. I got butterflies in my stomach as I realized what a coincidence this was and asked him how much he wanted. The old man smiled at me and told me that I could have it for free, that it used to belong to a kid who was about my age that didn't live here anymore. There was something weird about how the man phrased that, but I didn't really pay any attention. I was too caught up in not only finding the game, but getting it for free. I reminded myself to be a bit skeptical, since this looked like a pretty shady cartridge and there's no guarantee it would work. But then the optimism inside me interjected that maybe it was some kind of beta version or pirated version of the game, and that was all I needed to be back on Cloud 9. I thanked the man, and the man smiled at me and wished me well, saying goodbye then. At least that's what it sounded like to me. All the way in the car ride home, I had a nagging doubt if the man had said something else. My fears were confirmed when I booted up the game. To my surprise, it worked just fine. And there was one save already named simply as Ben. Goodbye, Ben. He was saying goodbye, Ben. I felt bad for the man. Obviously a grandparent and obviously going senile, and I, for some reason or another, reminded him of his grandson, Ben. Out of curiosity, I looked at the save file, eyeballing it. I could tell that he was pretty far in the game. He had almost all of the masks and three-fourths remaining of the bosses. I noticed that he had used an owl statue to save his game. He was on day 3, and by the stone tower temple with hardly an hour left before the moon would crash. I remember thinking that it was a shame that he had come so close to beating the game, but he never finished it. I made a new file named Link out of tradition and started the game, ready to relive my childhood. For such a shady looking game cartridge, I was impressed at how smoothly it ran. Literally just like a retail copy of the game, save for a few minor hiccups here and there, like textures being where they shouldn't be, random flashes of cutscenes at odd intervals, but nothing too bad. However, the only thing that was a little bit unnerving was that at times the NPCs would call me Link, and at other times they would call me Ben. And I figured it was just a bug, a fluke in the programming causing our files to get mixed or something. It did kind of creep me out though after a while. And it was around after I had beaten the Woodfall Temple that I regrettably went into the save file and deleted Ben. I had intended originally to preserve the file just out of respect of the game's original owner. It's not like I needed 2 files anyways. Hoping that that would solve the problem, it did. And it didn't. Now NPCs wouldn't call me anything. Where my name should be in the dialogue, there was just a blank space. My save file name was still called Link though. Frustrated and with homework to do, I put the game down for a day. Okay, this is actually pretty good. I kind of like this story. Let me just adjust the way I'm sitting and drink a swig of some water. I started playing the game again last night, getting the lens of truth and working my way towards completing the Snowhead Temple. Now, some of you more hardcore Majora's Mask players know about the 4th day glitch. For those who don't, you can Google it, but the gist of it is that right at as the clock is about to hit 000000 on the final day, You talk to the astronomer and look through the telescope. If you time it right, the countdown disappears and you essentially have another day to finish whatever you were doing. Deciding to do the glitch and try and finish the Snowhead Temple, I happened to get it right on the first try. And the time counted at the bottom, and the time that had counted at the bottom had disappeared. However, when I pressed B to exit the telescope, instead of being greeted by the astronomer, I found myself in the Majora boss fight room at the end of the game. The trippy boxed in area. Staring at Skull Kid hovering above me. There was no sound. Just him floating in the air above me. And the background music, which was regular for the area, but still creepy. Immediately, my palms began to sweat. This was definitely not normal. Not a regular area, but still creepy. Immediately. I mean, this. Okay, sorry. I accidentally read the line again because my eyesight. This was definitely not normal. Skull Kid never appeared here. I tried moving around the arena, and no matter where I went, Skull Kid would always be facing me, looking at me, not saying anything. Nothing would happen, though, and this kept up for around 60 seconds. I thought the game had bugged or something, but I was beginning to doubt that very much. I was about to reach for the reset button when text appeared on my screen. You're not sure why, but you apparently had a reservation. I instantly recognized that text. You get that message when you get the room key from Anju at the Stockpot Inn. But why was it playing here? I refused to entertain the notion that it was almost as if the game was trying to communicate with me. I started navigating the room again, testing to see if that was some sort of trigger that enabled me to interact with something here. Then I realized how stupid I was. To even think that someone could reprogram the game, this was absurd. Sure, enough. 15 seconds later, another message appeared on the screen. And again, like the first one, it was already a pre-existing phrase. Go to the lair of the temple's boss, yes or no? I paused for a second, contemplating what I should press and how the game would react, when I realized that I couldn't select no. Taking a deep breath, I pressed yes, and the screen faded to white, with the words dawn of a new day, with the subject text I beneath it, where I was teleported to, filled me with the most intense sense of dread and impending fear I had ever experienced. The only way I can describe the way I felt here is having this feeling of inexplicable depression on a profound scale. I'm normally not a depressed person, but the way I felt here was a feeling that I didn't even know existed. It was such a twisted, powerful presence that seemed to wash over me. I appeared in some kind of weird Twilight Zone version of the clock tower. I walked out of the clock tower, as you normally do when you start from day one, only to find that all the inhabitants were gone. Usually, with the fourth day glitch, you can still find the guards and the dog that runs around the outside of the tower. This time, they were all gone. What replaced them was the ominous feeling that there was something out there, in the same area as me, and that it was watching me. I had 4 hearts to my name and the hero's bow, but at this point, I wasn't even concerned for my avatar. I felt that I personally wasn't in danger. Perhaps the most chilling thing was the music. It was a song of healing rippling straight from the game itself, but played in reverse. The music would get louder, building up so as if you should expect something to pop out at you, but nothing ever did. And the constant loop began to wear on my mental state. Every now and then, I would hear the faintest laugh of the happy mask salesman in the background, just quiet enough so that I wasn't sure if I just started hearing things, but just loud enough to keep me determined to find him. I looked in all four zones of the clock tower only to find nothing. No one. Textures were missing. West Clock Tower had me walking on air. The entire area felt broken, hopelessly broken, as the reverse song of healing repeated for what it must have been the 50th time. I just remember standing in the middle of South Clock Tower, realizing that I had never felt so alone in a video game before. As I walked through the ghost town, I don't know whether it was the combination of the out of place textures and the atmosphere and the haunting melody of the once peaceful and soothing song being butchered and distorted and warped. But I was literally on the verge of tears, and I had no idea why. I hardly ever cry. Something had gripped me here, and this powerful sense of depression that was both foreign and crippling. I tried leaving the clock tower, but every time I attempted to zone out, the screen would fade to black and I would just zone in to another part of the clock tower. I tried playing my ocarina. I wanted to escape and I did not want to be here. But every time I played the Song of Time or Song of Soaring, it would only say, "Your notes go far, but nothing happens." By this point, it was obvious the game didn't want me to leave, but I had no idea why it was keeping me here. I didn't want to go inside the building. I felt that I would be too vulnerable over there, whatever I was terrified of. I don't know why, but I came up with the idea that maybe if I drowned myself at the laundry pool, I could spawn somewhere else and leave this place. As I zoned in and ran towards the pool, that's when it happened. Link grabbed his head, and the screen flashed for a brief moment of the happy mask salesman smiling at me. Not Link, me, with the Skull Kid scream playing in the background. And when the scream returned, I was staring at Link's statue from the playing song, Elegy of Emptiness. I screamed as the thing just stared back at me with that haunting facial expression. I turned around and ran out and back into the South Clock Tower. And to my horror, the fucking statue followed me in. The only way I can compare this is like the weeping angels from Doctor Who. Every so often, at random intervals, the animation would play off of the statue appearing behind me. It was like the thing was chasing me. Or I don't even want to fucking say it, haunting me. By this point, I was on the verge of hysteria, but not even once did the thought of turning off the console occur to me. I don't know why. I was so wrapped up in it. The terror felt so real. I tried to shake the statue, but it would literally appear right behind me every single goddamn time. Link started to begin to make weird animations I'd never seen him do before. He would flail his arms around with spasm randomly, and the screen would cut to the happy mask salesman smiling again, with that sick, sadistic smile for a brief moment, before I was face to face with that fucking statue again. I ended up running into the Sword Master's dojo and ran to the back. I don't know why, but in my panic, I just I just wanted some kind of assurance that I'm not here alone. To my dismay, I found no one, but as I turned to leave, the statue cornered me in the cubby in the back. And I tried attacking the statue with my sword, but to no avail. Confused and backed into a corner, I just started to stare at the statue, waiting for it to kill me. Suddenly, the screen flashed again to the happy masked salesman, and Link turned to face my screen, standing upright, mirroring the statue, looking at me along with his copy, literally staring into my eyes. Whatever was left of the fourth wall was completely shattered. While I ran out of the JoJo terrified, suddenly the game warped me to an underground tunnel, and the reverse song of healing queued up again as I was given a brief moment of rest before the statue started appearing behind me again. This time aggressively. I could only take a few steps before it would summon behind me. I hardly made my way out of the tunnel and appeared in the southern clock tower as I ran aimlessly in a sheer panic. Suddenly, a dreaded scream, and the screen faded to black as the dawn of a new day. And I appeared again. The screen faded in. Then I was standing on the clock tower with Skullkid hovering over me again silently. I looked up and the moon was back, looming just meters above my head, but the Skullkid just stared at me hauntingly with that fucking mask. The new song was playing. The Stone Tower Temple theme played in reverse in some sort of desperate attempt. I gripped my bow and fired off a shot at the Skullkid. And it actually hit him. And he played an animation of him reeling back. I fired again, and the third arrow, a text box appeared saying, "That won't do you any good." I was picked up off the ground, levitated upward on my back, and then Link screamed as he burst into flame, instantly killing him. I jumped when this happened. I had never seen this move used by anyone in the game, and Skull Kid himself didn't have any moves. As the death screen played, my lifeless body stood burning. The Skull Kid laughed, and the screen faded to black, only to have me reappear in the same place. And I decided to charge him, but the same thing happened. Link's body was lifted off the ground by some unknown force, and he immediately burst into flames again, killing him. This time during the death screen, the faint sounds of the reverse song of healing could be heard. On the third, my final try, I noticed that there was no music playing this time. That all there was eerie silence. I remember that in the original encounter with the Skull Kid, you were supposed to use the ocarina to either travel back in time or summon the giants. I attempted to play the Song of Time, but before I could hit the last note, Link's body once again horrifically exploded into flames and he died. As the death screen neared its end, I began to chug as if the cartridge was trying to process a lot of something. It began to chug, sorry. When the screen came to, it was the same scene as the first three times, except this time Link was lying on the ground dead in a position I'd never seen in the game before. His head tilted towards the camera, with the Skull Kid floating above him. I couldn't move. I couldn't press any buttons. All I could do is just stare at his lifeless corpse. After around 30 seconds of this, the game simply faded out with the message, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" before kicking me out to the title screen. Upon getting back to the title screen and starting again, I noticed my save file was no longer there. Instead of Link It was replaced with your turn. Your turn had 3 hearts, 0 masks, and no items. Selected your turn, and immediately when I did, I was returned to the clock tower. Rooftop scene of my Link dead, and the Skull Kid hovering over. With the Skull Kid laughing, looping again and again. I quickly hit the reset button, and when the game booted up again, there was one more save file added below. Your turn, entitled Ben's save file, is right back where it was before I deleted it. At the stone tower temple with the moon almost crashing. I turned the game off at that point. I'm not superstitious, but this is way too fucked up even for me. I haven't played it at all today. Hell, I didn't even get any sleep last night. I kept hearing the reverse song of healing music in my head and just remembered the sense of dread I felt exploring that goddamn clock tower. I drove back to the old man's house today to ask him some questions with a buddy of mine. No way I was going there alone, only to find out that there's a for sale sign in front of his yard. When I rang the door, no one was home, so now I'm back here, writing down the rest of my thoughts and recording what happened. Sorry if some of this has grammatical errors and whatnot. I'm running on no sleep here. I'm terrified of this game, even more so now that I relived it a second time, writing this all down, but I feel like there's still more to it than meeting the eye. And that there's something calling to me to investigate this further. I think Ben is something in this equation. I don't know what. And if I could get a hold of the old man, then I would be able to find some answers. I feel like, but next time, the next time I do this, I'm going to be recording my footage all the way through. The idea to record only came to me towards the end. So you see the last few minutes of what I saw, including Skull Kid and the elegy statue, but it's on YouTube here. I'm going to stay in this thread for a little while longer before I fall asleep to answer any questions you guys might have, or hopefully listen to your ideas or theories to help me shed some light into this. Or maybe things I should try to do. I think I'm going to play Ben's file tomorrow to see what happens. Maybe I was supposed to do that all along. I don't believe in paranormal shit, but this is a little fucked up. But maybe this Ben guy is just a really good hacker or programmer. I don't want to think about the alternatives if he isn't. That's the end of the copy pasta. I'm hoping that maybe this is some kind of running gag the developers had and that other people have gotten gag or hacked copies of this game. But I guess I'll find out tomorrow. Hello everybody. I hope you like that one. Hey guys, I hope you like that. I am mighty entertained. Did you guys like the scary story about the Majora's Mask cartridge? Hmm. How's my day? My day is actually pretty good. I'm doing creepy Halloween stuff, listening to podcasts, doing this. Ben Drown still holds up well. uh, Also, Isaac, can you do me a favor and at the server and let them know I'm streaming? Uh, if you hear that, Isaac, just do that, please. You know. Anyways, I hope you guys liked my little story time voice or something. I don't know. God, Ben Drowned is such a creepy story. Could you imagine getting Majora's Mask cartridge like that? It kind of makes me actually want to play Majora's Mask. I want to get murdered by a blonde guy. Anyways, everyone, I think for right now, I'm gonna go use the bathroom, and then we'll be right back to finish well, not to finish, but like to continue with more creepypastas. Leave suggestions in the chat, and I will be right back. Hello, all my lovely little trick or treaters. Don't forget, if you like this kind of content, make sure to send me a trick or a treat in the description. What I'm saying is, like, make sure to comment, like, subscribe, consider donating. And let's go into the next story for you guys to enjoy. I am so touched and glad that you guys are having so much fun with these stories. Even though I'm probably gonna get haunted after this and probably killed. But. Also, before I left Wildcat, you had a question. The music, I just went on YouTube and I was like Halloween copyright free hour long music, and I was just like, okay, let's just play this. Sorry, I just had to reset the music for a second. I saw somebody request Tiki Toby. Okay, let's do Tiki Toby. I love that when I type out Tiki Toby, all I see is a bunch of fan fiction. Okay, let's do this. Let's see. Is this it? This should be very, very fun, my darling. Now lay back, relax, and listen to my voice. Okay. The long road home seemed to go on and on. The road continued to stretch in front of the vehicle endlessly. The light that shone through the branches of the tall green trees danced across the windows in random patterns. And every once in a while, obnoxiously shining in your eyes. The surroundings were full of deep green trees, forming a forest around the road. The only sound was the sound of the car's engine as it traveled down the path. It was peaceful and left a serene feeling. Although the ride seemed like a nice one, it lacked every form of nice from its two passengers. The middle aged woman behind the steering wheel had neat, short brown hair that fit her complexion quite well. She wore a green v neck t shirt and a pair of blue jeans. Diamond studded earrings decorated each of her ears, which partially showed from behind her haircut. She had deep green eyes, which her shirt brought out, and the lighting seemed to make them more noticeable. There wasn't anything significant about her appearance. She looked like any other average mother you would see on TV shows and all the like. However, the one thing that made her different than the average mother was the dark bag she had under her eyes. Her facial expression was gloomy and sad, although she genuinely looked like someone that smiled a lot. She would sniffle every once in a while and occasionally glance in the rearview mirror to look at her son in the back seat, who was hunched over partially, with his arms held tight around his chest and his head pressed against the cold window. The boy lacked any normal presence, and anyone could painlessly see there was something wrong with him. His messy brown hair went every which way, and the luminescent lighting brought out his pale, almost gray skin. His eyes were dark, unlike his mother's, and he wore a white t shirt and scrub pants that had been provided for him by the hospital. The clothes he had worn before were so shredded and blood-stained that they weren't wearable anymore. The right side of his face bared a few cuts along with a split eyebrow. His right arm was bandaged all the way to the shoulder, which had been shredded when his right side hit the shattered glass. His injuries appeared to be painful, when in reality he couldn't feel anything. This was just one of the glories of being him. One of the challenges he had to face while growing up was growing up with a rare disease that caused him to be completely numb towards pain. Never before had he felt himself get hurt. He could have lost an arm and felt nothing. The other major disorder he had faced, which was the one that deemed him many insulting nicknames in a short time he attended grade school before he switched to homeschooling, was his Tourette's syndrome, which caused him to tick and twitch in ways he couldn't control. He would crack his neck uncontrollably and twitch every which way. The kid the kids would tease him and call him Picky Toby, and they mocked him with exaggerated twitches and laughter. It got so bad he had to turn to homeschooling. It was too hard for him to be in a common learning environment with seemingly every kid poking, or more like stabbing fun at him. Toby stared blankly out the window, his face empty of any emotion, and every few minutes his shoulders, arms, or foot would twitch. Every bump that the car tires hit would make his stomach turn. Toby Rogers was the boy's name, and the last time Toby remembered riding in a car was when it crashed. That's all he thought about unconsciously, replaying everything he remembered before he blacked out, over and over and over again. Toby had been the lucky one. His sister had not been so lucky. When the thought of his sister came, he couldn't help. He couldn't help the tears that welled up in his eyes, the horrible memories replaying in his mind, her screams that had cut off when the front of the car was smashed it. It all went blank for a moment before Toby opened his eyes to see his sister's body. Her forehead pierced with glass shards, her hips and legs crushed under the force of the steering wheel, and her torso pushed in from the too late inflated airbag. That was the last thing he had seen of his dear older sister. The road home continued on for what seemed like forever. It took so long to get home because his mom wanted to avoid the sight of the crash. When the surroundings gave way to a familiar neighborhood, they were both more than ready to get out of the car and step back into their own home. It was an older neighborhood with quaint little houses all next to each other. The car drove in front of a blue house with white window panes. They both quickly noticed the old vehicle that was parked in front of the house and the familiar figure that stood in the driveway. Toby felt automatic anger and frustration take over him at the sight of his father. His father who wasn't there. His mother pulled the car up in the driveway beside him before turning off the engine and preparing to step out and face her husband. "Why is he here?" Toby said quietly as he looked back at his mother who reached to open the car door. "He's your father, Toby. He's here because he wants to see you." His mother responds in a monotone voice, trying to sound less shaky. "Yet he couldn't drive up to the hospital to see Lyra before she died." Toby narrowed his eyes out the window. "He was drunk that night, honey. He couldn't drive." "Yeah, when is he not?" Toby pushed the door open before his mother and stumbled out onto the driveway where he met his father's gaze before looking down at his feet with a stern expression. His mother stepped up behind him and met her husband's eyes before walking around the car. His father opened up his arms expecting a hug from his wife, but she walked past him and put her arms around Toby's shoulder and started leading him inside. "Connie," her husband began in a raspy voice. "What, no welcome home hug?" She ignored her husband's obnoxious words and walked past him with her son under her arms. "Hey, he's 16. He can walk by himself." His father began to follow them. "He's 17. Connie glared back at him before opening the door to the house and stepping inside. "Toby, why don't we get you in your room to rest, okay? I'll come get you when dinner is ready." "No, I'm 16. I can walk by myself," Toby said sarcastically and glared back at his father before stumbling up a small staircase turning into his room, where he slammed the door violently. His little room didn't have much in it. Just a small bed, a dresser, a window, and his walls had few picture frames of his family back when they were a family. Before his father became an alcoholic and acted violently towards the rest of the family, Toby remembered when he was arguing with his mom and he grabbed her by the hair and shoved her to the floor, and when Lyra had to try to break it up, he pushed her and she hit her back on the corner of the kitchen counter. Toby could never forgive him for what he had done to his mother and sister. Never, never, ever, ever. Toby didn't care how much his father beat him down. He couldn't feel it anyways. What he did care about was how he intentionally hurt the only two people he cared about. And when he was waiting in the hospital where his sister took her last breath, the only one who did not rush there was his dad. Toby stood by the window and looked out at the street. He could have sworn he saw something out of the corner of his eye, but quickly blamed it on the medication he was on. When dinner time had come and his mother called up to him, Toby came down the stairs and hesitantly sat down at the table across from his father, and in between his mother, an empty chair. It was quiet as his parents picked at their food, but Toby refused to eat. Instead, he just watched his dad with a blank stare. His mother caught on to his staring and elbowed him slightly. Toby looked over at her slightly and then down at his uneaten food, which he still didn't touch. Later on, Toby laid in his bed. He pulled his covers over his head and stared at the window. He was tired, but there was no way he would fall asleep. He couldn't. There was too much to think about. He had been debating on whether or not to follow his mother's directions and forgive his father, or continue holding a grudge with his boiling hatred. He heard his door creak open and his mother padded into the room and sat on the bed next to him. She reached over and rubbed his back, which had been turned to her. I know it's hard, Toby. Trust me, I understand, but I promise you it will get better, she said softly. When is he going to leave? Toby said with an innocent tone in his shaky voice. Connie let her gaze fall down to her feet. I don't know, honey. He's staying as far as I know, she replied. Toby didn't respond. He just continued to look forward at the wall, holding his damaged arm near his chest. After a few minutes of silence, his mother sighed before she leaned in to kiss his cheek and stood up to walk out of the room. Good night, she said as she closed the door. The hours passed slowly, and Toby couldn't quit tossing and turning. Every time he let his imagination take over, he heard the screeching of the tires, the screaming of his sister, and he would uncontrollably jerk in bed. He threw off his covers, lying on his back. He pulled his pillow over his face and cried into it. He could hear his own pitiful weeping. He would have been screaming and crying if he didn't press his pillow over his face. After a few seconds, he threw the pillow off his face and sat up, hunched over, holding his head and breathing roughly. Tears streaming from his eyes. He couldn't help but cry. He tried to keep it in, but he couldn't stop the whining and whimpering as he sat there shaking. He inhaled before he stood up and walked around his bed to the window and peered out, taking deep breaths. Trying to calm down, he rubbed his eyes and looked out at the group of tall pine trees across the street. He stopped suddenly, and his gaze slowly centered on something standing under the streetlight. He heard ringing in his ears and couldn't look away. The figure stood behind the streetlight, about 2 feet shorter than it did. Long arms draped at its side as it stared up at him with non-existent eyes and a blank face. The figure had no facial features to speak of, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, yet it held Toby's hypnotized stare, seemingly peering into his very being. The ringing in his ears grew louder and louder each second he stared before suddenly it all went black. The next morning, Toby woke up in his bed. He felt different. He wasn't tired at all. And when he consciously woke up, it felt like he had been lying there awake for hours. He had no thoughts flowing through his mind. He sat up slowly and stumbled over to the wall. But when he stood, he automatically felt dizzy. He stumbled to the doorway and walked down the stairs. His parents were sitting at the table. His father was tuned in to the small TV that sat on the countertop, and his mother was reading the newspaper. She quickly looked over when she felt Toby's presence looming behind her. Well, good morning, sleepyhead. You've been sleeping forever. She greeted him with a hesitant smile. Toby slowly looked at the clock and noticed it was 12:30 p.m. I made you breakfast, but it got cold. I was going to wake you up, but I felt you needed sleep. Her expression fell from happy to worried as her son resisted responding to her. Are you all right? Toby stumbled over and sat by his father. He felt as if he was on idle and had no control over his actions. He was seeing everything he did, but didn't register in his brain properly. He reached out to his father's arm, but his hand ended up getting slapped. His father turned to him abruptly and pushed his chair over with his foot. His father shouted, "Don't touch me!" His mother stood up. His mother stood up and shouted, "All right, that's enough. This is the last thing we need." The day went by and things continued on as they were. Connie spent most of her time cleaning the house, and her rude husband spent most of his time ordering her around. It was just like how it used to be before the crash. Toby never really left his room. He would sit by his bed and tremble. His mind would wander, but his thoughts changed too fast to be remembered. He would pace around his small room like a caged animal or stare out the window. The unhealthy cycle continued. Connie continued to be pushed around by her husband, being way too submissive to him, and Toby remained in his room. Before he could think twice, he began to chew on his own hands, tearing the flesh from his fingers. He would gnaw his hands until they bled. When his mother walked in on him while he was doing so, she reacted horribly. She rushed him downstairs and grabbed the first aid kit, wrapped his hands in bandages. Afterwards, she demanded that he wouldn't leave her side again. Toby isolated himself so much that he grew to hate being around others. His memory grew glitchy as well. He'd start missing memories of minutes, hours, days, and so on. He would begin to talk nonsense about things completely unrelated to the conversations he would have. He'd go off about seeing things, sharks in the sinks as he washed the dishes, hearing crickets in his pillows, and seeing ghosts outside his bedroom window. His mother grew so anxious about his mental health that she decided it would be good for him to talk to a professional about it. Connie walked Toby into the building, holding his hand and guiding him in. She walked him up to the front desk and began talking to the lady who sat behind it. Mrs. Rogers? Yes, that's me, Connie nodded. We're here to see Dr. Oliver. I'm here with Toby Rogers. Yes, right this way. The lady stood and led them down a long hallway. Toby looked at the framed artwork down the hall and turned to the sound of the lady's high heels on the hardwood floor. She opened the door to a room with a table and 2 chairs. If we can get him to sit in here for a few minutes, I'll get the doctor. She smiled and held the door open. Toby stumbled into the room and sat down at the table. He looked over at his mother and the lady before the door slowly shut behind them. He looked around the room before he held up his tight bandaged hands and began to bite and gnaw at the bandages to unwrap his hands. But he was interrupted as the door swung open and a young woman in a black and spotted dress with light blonde hair stepped in, holding a clipboard and a pen. Toby? She asked with a smile. Toby looked up at her and nodded. Nice to meet you, Toby. My name is Dr. Oliver. She put her hand out for him to shake. By hesitation, he pulled away when. Oh, wait, she pulled away when she noticed his bandages. Oh, she smiled nervously before clearing her throat and sitting in the chair across the table from him. So, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Try to answer them as honestly as possible, okay? She placed her clipboard down on the table. Toby nodded and held his restrained hand in his lap. So, how old are you, Toby? 17, he responded. She wrote that down on the paper that was clipped to the clipboard. What is your full name? Toby Aaron Rogers. When is your birthday? April 28th. Who is your immediate family? Toby paused for a minute before answering her question. My mom, my dad, and he stopped. My sister. I heard about your sister, dear. I'm really sorry. Her expression faded into a sad, pity-filled look. Toby nodded. Do you remember anything from the crash, Toby? Toby looked away from her. His mind went blank for a moment. He looked down at his lap and in the surrounding areas. He heard a faint ringing sound. His eyes widened as he froze in place. Toby? Toby? Toby, are you listening? Toby felt a shiver go down his spine until he froze once again and slowly looked over out the little window through the door where he saw it. A dark, featureless figure peering at him. He stared eyes wide, the ringing growing louder and louder until suddenly the loud voice of the counselor broke his trance. Toby! Toby jumped and fell sideways out of his chair and backed up into the corner. Dr. Oliver stood up, holding her clipboard to her chest, a surprised look in her eyes. Toby met her eyes again, his breathing hitching as he twitched. That night, Toby lay in bed. His eyes were dazed as he stared straight up at his ceiling. He could feel himself begin to doze off when he heard the scattering of footsteps down his hallway. He sat up and looked towards the doorway, his door wide open. There was no light. Everything was lit by the luminescent blue glow of the moon through his window, leaving a cold lighting. He stood up and slowly made his way towards the doorway when suddenly the door, which previously was wide open, slammed in his face. He gasped and fell to the floor. He was out of breath when he hit the ground and began breathing heavily, his eyes wide open. He waited for a few seconds before getting back on his feet. He reached out and grasped the cold door handle with his bandages. Sorry, I'm noticing all the people in chat. With his bandaged hand, and it creaked open. He looked out into the dark hallway and tiptoed out of his room. The window at the end of the hallway lit up dark with blue moonlight. He patted his way down. He could hear footsteps rustling around him and faint giggling, followed by the pitter-patter of small feet, which sounded like a child had run in front of him. Giggling and running around the hallway was a lot longer than he remembered. It seemed endless, like the ride home from the hospital. He heard the door creak in front of him. Mom? He called in a shaky voice. Suddenly a door slammed behind him, and he jumped and turned around behind him. He heard a long, eerie groan that sounded like broke right in his ear. He turned around as fast as he could and was suddenly face to face with none other than his dead sister. Her eyes were clouded white, her skin pale, the right side of her jaw dangling there by tissue and muscle alone. Glass protruding from her forehead, black blood oozing, leaking down her face, her blonde hair rolled up in a ponytail as it always was, and she was wearing her gray t-shirt and athletic shorts, which were dirty and spotted with blood. Her legs were bent in ways that shouldn't be. She stood emitting a long, croaking noise only an inch away from Toby's face. Toby yelped and fell back. He started to crawl backwards, away from her. But he was unable to break the eye contact he held with her blank, dead-eyed stare. He dragged himself backwards until he backed up into something. He stopped for a second. Everything was dead silent except for his heavy breathing and crying. He slowly looked up to meet the blank face of a tall figure, the same figure that stood over him now. Behind the tall, dark mass were rows of children looking to range from 3 to 10 years old, their eyes completely blank and dark black blood leaking from their eye sockets. He screamed and stood up as fast as he could, only to be tripped by the dark black tendrils that wrapped around his ankles. He fell straight on his stomach and got the wind knocked out of him. He tried to scream, but he couldn't make a sound. He wheezed out before it all went black. Toby woke with a start. He screamed and sat up as fast as he could. Completely short of breath, he wheezed out and held his chest with his bandaged hand. It was just a dream, but it felt so real. He lay back down on his bed and rolled over on his side. It felt like against weight. It felt like against weight had been lifted off his chest, and he took in the deep breath. He stood up and padded over to his window. He saw nothing. Nobody was out there. No ghosts, no figures, no mass serial killers. He heard the rustling and coughing of his father outside the doorway. His door was closed. He walked over and opened it, looked out into the hallway once again. He padded down the hallway and into the kitchen, where he found his dad standing and having a smoke in the living room. Toby waited for a second and watched him from around the corner before a burning feeling stared deep into his chest. Deep, boiling anger overtook him. He heard the little imaginary voice in his head. Do it, do it, do it, do it. He turned away and held his arms. He felt like he actually had control over himself, unlike he did for the past few weeks since he got home from the hospital. He actually had complete thoughts for just a moment before the chanting of the little voice in his head clouded him. Kill him. He wasn't there. He wasn't there. Kill him. Kill him. They continued on. Toby trembled. No, no, no. He wasn't going to do it. What is he? Was he going crazy? No, he won't kill him. He can't. He hates his father, but there's no way he was going to kill him. That was it. The last thought he had before he fell into an idle state once again. The influence of the voices in his head was so much, too much to handle. He began to silently walk up behind his father. He reached over the counter to the knife in the case. He gripped it in his hand. He felt the sensation take over his chest. He let out a snicker. He began laughing so hard he had to gasp for breath. His father turned around abruptly before he felt a brute force shove him to the floor. He grunted as the air was knocked out of him. What the? He looked up. The boy who stood over him grasping the kitchen knife in his hand. Toby, what are you doing? He went to sit up and put his arms out in front of him in self-defense, but before he knew it, Toby was on top of him. He went to grab his neck, but his father reached out and blocked his hand and grabbed onto his wrist. Stop it! Get off of me, you little fucker! He yelled, and with his other hand, he threw an off-center punch towards Toby's shoulder. But he didn't stop. The look in Toby's eyes was not sane. It looked as if a demon had taken control of him. He yelled back and stabbed a knife into his father's chest, but his father blocked him and grabbed onto his wrist once again. He went and shoved him back, but Toby kicked his feet out in front of him and landed a hard blow straight to his father's face. His father recoiled and pulled his arms away to cuff his face, but Toby got back up and drove the knife straight into his shoulder. His father let out a cry of plead. He begged and went to pull the knife out, but before he could, Toby threw his fist straight into his face. He began to pound his fists into his head, laughing and wheezing. He cracked his neck and grabbed the knife and ripped it out of his father's shoulder. He drove it deep into his dad's chest and repeatedly stabbed into his torso, blood spilling out and getting splattered everywhere. He didn't stop until his father's body went still. He threw the knife over to the side and leaned over his body, coughing and panting. He stared at his father's smashed-in face and sat there twitching until a loud scream broke the silence. He looked over to see his mother standing a few feet away, covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Toby, what did you do? She screamed. Toby stood up and began to back away from his father, the bloody corpse that laid on the floor. He began to back out of the kitchen. He looked down at the blood-soaked bandages on his hands and looked up at his mother one last time before he turned and ran out of the house. He ran into the garage and slammed his hand against the control panel on the wall and pushed the button to open the garage. Before he ran out, he noticed his father's hatchets, which had been hanging on the tool rack above a table full of jars filled to the brim with old rusted nails and screws. One of the hatchets was new. It had a bright orange handle and a shiny blade, and the other was old with a wooden handle and an old dull blade. He grabbed both and looked down at the table and saw a box of matches, and under the table was red gasoline tank. He held both of the hatchets in one hand and grabbed to the matches and gasoline before running out of the garage, down the driveway and up the street. As he approached the street lights that he could see out of his own bedroom window, he heard police sirens in the distance. He turned around and the red and blue flashing lights came around the street. Toby stood for a second before he pulled open the cap on the gasoline tank and ran down the street, spilling gasoline all over the street after him. He turned and ran into the trees. He poured the last bit of gasoline out before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a match. He struck it against the box and immediately dropped it. In an instant, flames burst around him. The fire caught on the trees and brush around him, and before he knew it, he was surrounded by flame. The silhouette of police cars were visible through the flames as he backed away into the forest around him. He looked around, but his vision was blurred. His eyes were pounding, and he closed his eyes for a moment. This was it. This was the end. Toby felt a hand on his shoulder. He opened his eyes and looked over to see a large, white hand with long, bony fingers resting on his shoulder. He followed the arm that was attached to the hand up to a dark, towering figure. It appeared to be wearing a dark black suit, and its face was completely blank. It towered over Toby, his small frame next to nothing to this monster. As it looked down at him, tendrils reached out from its back. Before Toby knew it, his vision blurred and he heard the sounds ringing in his ears. Everything went blank. That was it. That was the end. That was how Toby Rogers died. A few weeks later, Connie sat in her sister's kitchen. Her sister Lori sat next to her drinking a cup of coffee. About 3 weeks ago, Connie lost her husband and her son. And a few weeks before, she had lost her daughter too. They had just finished cleaning up the case, and the story had been released 2 weeks ago. The focus of the world seemed to have shifted to a completely new story. Lori switched the TV on to a news broadcast on the TV. The news reporter began introducing the new headlines. We have breaking news. Last night there have been reports of the murder of 4 individuals. There are no suspects yet, but the victims were a group of middle school kids who had been out in the woods late last night. The kids had been bludgeoned and stabbed to death. The investigators have discovered a weapon at the crime scene. It appears to be an old dull bladed hatchet, as you can see here. The picture changed to show snapshots of the weapon exactly as it was left at the crime scene. Investigators have pulled the name of possible suspects. Toby Rogers, a 17-year-old boy who stabbed his father to death a few weeks ago and tried to cover up his escape by setting the woods on fire around his surrounding neighborhood. Although they believe the young boy had died in the fire, investigators suspect Rogers might still be alive, due to the fact that his body was never discovered. All right, guys, that was another one. That was fun. That was real fun. I hope you guys like my story voice. Yeah. Well, I think I did pretty fun. I think I did pretty fun. All right, guys. Man, I've been streaming for 2 hours. Okay, so we did a couple of creepypastas. Stay tuned again tomorrow where we will be doing even more. Which ones did I just read? I read Eyeless Jack. I read Ben Drowned. I just read Tiki Toby. And I read Bloody Painter. Anyways, if you guys like this, please do make sure to like, subscribe, comment, consider donating, as it funds the channel and everything I do, and it's overall very helpful, and it helps me upgrade my equipment and stuff. Either way, check out my Patreon. It's filled with a lot of good content, and yeah, I think we're done for the night. Stay tuned. Come in tomorrow, guys, where I will be reading even more creepypastas. And if you guys join the Discord, maybe, throw me a few suggestions. I have a little feedback section in my Discord. Just a few suggestions for creepypastas you guys want me to read. And, yeah. I think we can end it here. I love you guys. I hope you all had a really fun time with this. And, yeah. Have a great day. See you later, sweetheart.